loops on now. Thank you very much. It's lovely to have you with us. Scotch egg for lunch. Exodus chapter 14. I'm reading the whole of the chapter. It's a lovely, lovely story. Just enjoy it. You could either just sit quietly, close your eyes and listen to the story, or you could follow the words on the screen. They might be slightly different to the version that I'm reading, but it's that lovely, lovely story that leads up to the redemption of the people of Israel, which paves the way for the redemption of the people of the world in Jesus Christ on the cross. So here goes. Exodus 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to camp by the sea, directly opposite Baal-zephon. Pharaoh will think, the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." So the Israelites did this. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, and officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us into the desert to die? What have you done? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought the darkness to one side and light to the other, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all the night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and looked at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and the horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing towards it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. This is the word of the Lord.
Long reading, but we felt it was one that we couldn't cut off. We couldn't cut bits out of it. It would take away what was there. It's an exciting story, isn't it? Yes? Very exciting. It's dramatic, it's scary in places, especially for the Israelites. They had suffered greatly, and finally they had been allowed to move out to celebrate their feast. But where they were in Etham, the decisive step would have to be taken. Would they celebrate and then return, or march onwards by the head of the Red Sea into the desert, with a view there to final departure from Egypt? They were already on the borders of the desert, and a hard march would take them beyond the reach, the pursuit of the Egyptians, as the Egyptian chariots could have made little progress over the desert sand, the yielding sand being caught in their wheels. But no, at Etham there's a new command from God. They are commanded to go south. This meant they were on a route that not only detained them in the confines of Egypt, but also meant they turned their backs on the land which they had hoped to possess. Change of direction. A movement which God gave them to take, which had hidden or concealed purpose, that only God knew the purpose, to bring him glory. It left them, it must have, mustn't it, baffled and astonished, even Moses himself. Though because of his faith, his firm faith in the wisdom and the power of his heavenly guide, he obeyed. So they move in that direction. Surely this could only be to entice Pharaoh to follow them. And it would bring a releasing of God's people only if Pharaoh didn't. That must have been what they were thinking. Releasing them from bondage. Pharaoh must have been a little confused as well. What do you think? There they were, ready to be taken back. And suddenly, they changed direction. Surely they've made an error, a mistake. And it's being acted out in front of him. He couldn't believe his luck, I shouldn't think. And once again, believed them to be entirely within his power. Surely escape for them now would be impossible. The mountains on one side and the Red Sea on the other. As we heard, he had already, and his people had, regretted letting them go. They'd lost their workforce. It was going to be okay. We can know it's going to be okay because we know the rest of the story, but let's look at this. He could restore himself and bring honour to himself. This is Pharaoh, if he could get these people back. And into a bit of a pantomime, really, isn't it? Oh, yes, I can. No, you can't. But you can imagine Pharaoh's thoughts, can't you? So there's another hot pursuit. Stronger chariots, more men, and off they go, who bore down on the Israelites. Surely it was not possible for the Israelites to resist that force. And then there's a command through Moses. God has given this command. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. How scary must that have felt? With all these troops coming in. Moses and the people being tested yet again. But courageously they did as commanded. And there was a cloud with them, an angel with them. But now they have moved behind them. So protecting, shielding, covering, placing something of a barrier. So they go forward. And Moses is told to reach out his hand over the sea, and we all know that part of the story. Sea separates, there's dry land. And I feel that Moses and Aaron were probably the first to put their feet on that dry land to encourage the others as the Egyptians pursued. Did you take on board that the Egyptians were confused by the light that came? Moses has stretched out his hand. The sea begins to go. And there's a massive wave which throws the Egyptians into the sea, throws them out on the dry land. We've heard this story many times before, but have we really taken into our hearts the power that is here, the power of God which is related here? Israel's God is in charge. Our God is in charge. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Do not be afraid, he says. Stand firm. And now they can see what had been concealed, hidden from them before. The glory of God was revealed through this action. We take this for ourselves. It's not easy, is it? To stand firm, to stand still within our faith when difficulties come to us, be they health or whatever. To stand firm and to know that our wonderful God will step in. Not always as we want or expect, but he will step in. But surely hearing this story, recalling the life, death and resurrection of Jesus, redemption, which this story is a foretaste of, God's Son, Jesus, brings it to fulfillment. Surely this must hint to us that we can stand firm. We can be still and trust him. Maybe life has twists and turns, just like that journey for the Israelites, and what seems like blind alleys that we have to face, tunnels with no light at the end of them, time passing and little seeming to happen, little or nothing within our lives to bring relief, healing and release from that which holds and binds, which drags us down as situations multiply and don't abate. Perhaps if we're feeling like this, we can remember this story and many others of the relief that our God brings. The story of restoration. It's a story of healing and hope. We need to trust in the same way that Moses and those people did. And to remember that nothing is impossible with our God. As the hymn says, no work too hard for him. In faith, receive for him. And be willing to stand firm in our faith. For he is with us, just as he was with them so long ago. He is for us, and always will be. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. So Lord, help us to be still and to recognize your great power, your great love pouring into us. And even if it seems to take many twists and turns, help us to hang on to you in faith, for you will never settled down.